Welcome, everyone, to another episode of TrueNAS Tech Talk. It's episode 13, and today we'll give a quick update on the 24.10.2 adoption for electric eel, some more fangtooth news from Kris. We're going to talk a lot about AI. I know there's been some interesting news in there, and answer a couple of viewer questions about ARC, L2ARC, and TrueNAS on ARM. So, without further ado, Kris, let's get into it here. So, it's been just about 3 days since 24.10.2 dropped, our latest update for electric eel. And I got to say, the uptake, as usual, has been fantastic on this release. What are we looking at for numbers-wise here?
We've been tracking it closely. And again, it's a new record for any kind of .2. We always go and compare to previous releases, which was 6 months ago, just to see how we're doing, how's it working in the community. And so far, it's phenomenal. We've had well over 10,000 systems have upgraded. Matter of fact, I think over 16K as of just this morning. It's only been in the wild a couple of days. The number of bug reports has been at an all-time low as well. There's been a handful of things, but we're talking single-digit numbers. This is really small. So this is good. A very stable release. This is exactly what you want in a .2. By that point, you don't want to be introducing new scary things and breaking things and regressing. So this is exactly in line with what we'd expect for a .2 release. And thanks to everyone who has upgraded, tested, and given us feedback on the forums, on Reddit. We try and look at as much as we can. I can't promise I personally see everything, but I do try and at least skim and see what's going on and get the general vibe from everyone. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we try to look at all of it. I would say we read pretty much all of the feedback. We sometimes can't respond to anything or everything rather, but we do want to, thank you again for providing all this information. It really is valuable to us up here at TrueNAS, and especially in the engineering team. When you submit those bug reports and you say, hey, here's how I reproduced it, and you give us the debug files, those are invaluable. So please keep on doing that. Use that smiley face in the UI, or maybe whatever we change it to in an upcoming version. I hear some of you don't like the smiley face.
We should mention the smiley face again, too. If you do like what you're seeing and it just works, it's okay to hit the smiley face and just send a 5-star like, hey, this page is awesome, or this feature is working good. That feedback helps us also know where we're doing a good job, so that we can say, oh, that's really cool that people like this. Let's go do that elsewhere in the UI or implement this wider across the fleet. So anyway, again, feedback's always good. I'd rather have too much than too little. So please keep it coming.
Yeah, no need for a login for that kind of quick, star rating feedback. Just let us know what we're doing right, or let us know what we're doing wrong. We want to hear about it.
I want to hear about the rough sections too. Sometimes that's more important because I need to know where to go focus attention next. But
absolutely. Hey, speaking about focusing attention, yeah. What's coming next here?
So we're at an interesting point now. We're about 2 weeks out from the beta of Fangtooth, which is now the newly dubbed Community Edition as well. So that's exciting. We're in the run up to it. Internally here, we're all busy working hard. We've got internal testing builds that we're going through. They're looking better every day. I'm really getting stoked. I've got even one of my personal systems is already running on it. Pre-beta. I know I'm a cowboy like that, but it's part of the job and I enjoy it. But on the other side, I know we've mentioned in the past the Incus VMs. We're still getting a lot of work. They've come through big. The UI team and the backend team this last week has done a lot of work. That feature is going to look in much better shape by beta. Of course, it's still going to be experimental, but there's going to be a lot for people to love in this release. And I will say I'm finally making good on it. I've mentioned many times over the years, people have said, oh, when is the VM section going to get some love and get re-updated? And I keep telling people it's coming. I haven't forgot you. We still want to do it. It's just time and resource. Finally, it's here. We finally rototilled that section, revamped it. It was way easier for me to spin up a Windows 11 VM than ever. I got everything working, TPM, secure boot, VNC now with passwords, all that just kind of point and click and intuitive. It was even easier than the XCPNG we use internally for other things. So I was pretty darn pleased to see how just smooth it worked. All that to say, there's still work to do. We have some ISO management features. So as you upload ISOs for VMs, you can go and delete them and reuse them. I don't think that's going to make beta. That's probably going to be an RC thing, but it's coming. So excited to get that in. And the one thing that's not going to make the cut is we do eventually want to do some stuff with cloud in it. So this is something Incus supports natively, and you see different images in the catalog that say cloud and it enabled. And down the road, that'll probably be a Gold-Eye thing. In the fall, we'd like to expose that so you can go and provide your credentials, your SSH keys, all that stuff in advance when you're clicking the deploy button. So a lot of exciting stuff ahead. I'm really eager to get that all in.
Yeah, the fact that we've got the Windows 11 support means, TPM is working great. So that's a pretty major hurdle to clear for a lot of people, especially those who are wondering what's going to happen in this October when, they can't or they're not supposed to run Windows 10 anymore. So,
yeah,
I mean,
it was important.
The other answer is, well, look at all these Linux versions we have in the catalog. You could try one of those.
And those are just so simple to spin up. You want to bring up an Ubuntu in under 10 seconds, just click a button and it goes, and they download remarkably fast. So it's great. It's really good to see. I got Windows 11 spun up yesterday. You have to do a little bit of fiddling because you have to build a Windows 11 ISO that has the VirtIO drivers, and we'll provide links and details on how to do that. The process is actually pretty simple as long as you have access to some kind of Linux system where you can install a distro builder. It's a one command. You type it, it regenerates your ISO, it spits it out in a few minutes, and then you're good to go. I actually don't doubt people have put those on the internet to download it places. They're not officially Microsoft approved, but I'm sure you can find them.
Yeah, I'd be cautious downloading an operating system that somebody else claims to have modified, because you never know what might be coming along for the ride. I still remember the days of, what was it, press F6 to insert the floppy disk to load your RAID drivers during the Windows setup. Yeah, I'm dating myself here again, aren't I?
Well, that's what you basically have to bypass now, is you'll boot it up and it'll say, I can't find any storage to install onto. So going through that process basically loads the VirtIO drivers so that Windows sees it. It works natively. I got as far as I installed Windows, and then it, of course, prompted me to sign into Microsoft accounts. And I was like, nah, I'm good. I've proved it works. I'm happy now. I don't need to go through all the rigmarole. But no, it's exciting. You guys know, you've heard, I'm not big on running Windows anywhere at this point, but I know a lot of folks still have need, and some people are doing it for gaming. We talked to Damien a few weeks back. So more power to you. It's going to get very exciting. And we did make good on the Steam headless, by the way. That landed in the app catalog a week and a half ago, I want to say. So hopefully people are playing with that now. And I've already seen people send feedback in and wanting to add knobs. So some people are giving us some traction.
I'm going to have to give that a shot. I'm going to have to buy some more graphics cards, keep moving them around between all my test machines to test out different things. But I mean, hey, speaking of graphics,
you're a bit of a graphics junkie, aren't you?
I am a bit of a graphics enthusiast. And before anybody asks, no, I did not manage to get a 50 series. I don't know how many people managed to do that. If you're listening to this and you got a 50 series card somehow, I mean, congratulations. Probably buy a lottery ticket next, I would say, because you definitely beat the odds.
Yeah, Chris officially hates you. He's jealous.
I know I'm not the only one here. I'll see if I can find the video, but somebody had sent me. They had tried to code something to basically refresh all of the different graphics cards on a site. So as soon as it said in stock, they'd hit to buy. They got nothing. They got absolutely nothing. And we're talking like, a dozen windows across multiple monitors. They got nothing. But I heard I didn't want the 5080 anyways. Those grapes were probably pretty sour.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. Anyways.
Okay, let's get into some other news.
What else can we use graphics cards for? Or maybe we don't need to use them as much anymore, Chris.
Well, it's related, so we should talk about it. The big news everyone's been talking about this week is kind of on the AI war side. And I saw an interesting article about the DeepSeek reveal, and I think it was like Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank wrote an op-ed piece about, China fired the first shots in the AI war. And I took a step back and kind of chuckled, and I read that. I was like, I don't think they fired the first shots. I think we did when we banned the chips that they needed to go build their own. And this is just their response. So I looked at it and I was like, well, what did you expect to happen? You said we can't give you the chips. So they're either going to do one of two things. They're either going to go build their own chips to compete, or they're going to develop software that doesn't need the chip power. And guess what they did? They released new software that doesn't need it. So we should have expected this. It was coming, but there's a lot of irony here. I'm actually enjoying the deliciousness of just the irony of, China comes out with this model that kind of undercuts OpenAI and supposedly is far cheaper. Again, devil's in the details. How much of this has been verified? Blah, blah, blah. Did they train on OpenAI? Whatever. Don't care. But what's interesting is they open sourced it all. So, I'm an open source guy, so I got to give credit where credit's due. Good for you guys. You open sourced it. That's awesome. I've heard all the different complaints about, using the service and sending your data, and they had a data breach, and I get it. Yeah, all that stuff's not great, but it's still a dang good model. I've run the local Olama version here, and we have Open Web UI spun up, and it's pretty darn good for programming things. So I can't complain.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty interesting. I admit I've had a bit of schadenfreude there as well, looking at OpenAI, who people have accused of stealing content, is now looking at DeepSeek and saying, you stole our content. And it just kind of makes me go, well, you're both kind of mapped to the Dev Ouroboros here, where you're just eating each other's tail at some point. you're going to have AI feeding AI feeding AI, and all I can think of is, isn't this how Skynet started? So
It's
nobody
getting
put
smarter.
this. Yeah, nobody install this on your Tesla or something, because then it's going to learn how to get around, and well, then we're in trouble.
Oh yeah. So I guess the joke is, when does OpenAI rename to closed AI? Because I mean, no, China threw the gauntlet down. They released it. They said, we did this. Here you go. And it's open. It's MIT licensed, of all things. We talked about licensing last week. So again, good for them. OpenAI, come on, guys. We want to be part of this OpenAI revolution. So there's a lot for me to like here, even if there's certain aspects of DeepSeek I don't like. But hopefully, again, competition's good. You need a disruptor. It's been a bit of a bubble for a while, honestly. So maybe those GPUs will get cheaper again, Chris, and you can go back on a graphics binge. Get a bunch of new cards.
I'd love that. Let's get a bunch of those. Maybe I can actually have some VRAM. Please, sir, may I have some VRAM? So let's shift gears. We're still talking about memory, but we're no longer talking about video memory. So we picked up a great viewer question here from Jonathan, where he says, hey guys, I don't know if this is good for T3 or should it just be a forum thread? Well, why not both? Let's talk about it on T3 and let's spin up a forum thread or maybe a resource for some details. He says, I've noticed a lot of users with low amounts of RAM and large L2ARC devices. Today I saw one with 32 gigabytes of RAM and a 1 terabyte L2ARC device. I'm theorizing this combination is one of the performance issues this user might be having, but I don't actually know how the memory works between ARC and L2ARC. Is the combination just as flushable as plain ARC? Is L2ARC causing a higher minimum ARC value? Like it can't flush all of ARC because some of it's required for L2ARC mappings. So he's noticed this on the forum threads for, Proxmox backup server, NFS performance. And then he snuck in another question here where he said, maybe it's time to raise the minimum or required RAM values for scale. So I don't know, like maybe I'll jump into the first one in a second, but with regards to, I guess, the minimum RAM values for scale, we haven't changed those in a while, Chris. And it's primarily, the question for scale is lots of people see that big giant app catalog we have, the fact that we've added Docker. But for those of you who are just using it as a NAS, I mean, you can still run it on 8 gigs fairly fine.
That's the issue, right? It's a minimum for a reason. We say it's a minimum because, 8 gigs. Yeah, you need to set up a server. You're going to do like an SMB server and that's it. Sure, you could probably get away with 8 gigs and do a little NFS. Fine. That's a minimum. It works. It's viable. It's a minimum, though. Remember that word. That's key. It's a minimum. We obviously would recommend to get more RAM. I think if anything these days, CPUs are getting more powerful. You have GPU acceleration. RAM is the place I wouldn't cheap out. If I was building a new TrueNAS right now, I would try and say RAM is the more and more important thing because, again, it's so easy to get tempted and say, oh, I'll just deploy that one app. Oh, well, actually, I need that other. Oh, next thing you know, you wake up and you got a dozen apps running in your catalog, and guess what? They all want memory. Usually you have plenty of CPU to go around, but memory is in short supply if you're starting with 8 or 16 gigs.
Exactly. Like the general rule of thumb in the virtualization world is you can overcommit your CPU all you want, like, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, higher numbers. It just it degrades your performance a little bit if you're running all the things at the same time. But you really don't want to overcommit memory because as soon as you run out of it, you have to go from the, light speed nanosecond level memory. You're going down to, at best microseconds on your SSD and more likely milliseconds. It's a big shift in how fast your apps will run from that. So, the more memory, the better.
Yeah. At this point, again, if I was doing just a bare NAS by itself, I would say my recommendation is 16 gigs. That way you have a little cushion, a little more ARC. That's a good thing. And then if you're planning on doing apps, I'd say seriously, you should be looking at 32 and up. I run 64 on my homebrew systems, and I do have like a dozen apps installed, from Image to Jellu for book cataloging, Kavita, Tailscale, Nginx Proxy Manager, the works. It's one of those things, again, it's easy to open the door. Next thing you know, you're like, oh crap, I got, 12 things deployed. Fine, my CPU is great, but it is good to have the extra memory to support that and do it comfortably without impacting NAS performance too much.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, that's going to get quoted all over the forums now saying, oh, now there's a 16 gig minimum. It's like, well,
it's not a minimum. It's my recommendation. Again, a minimum, if you're running at SMB only or at NFS only, you can get away with it. Again, as you get the performance out of what kind of hardware you feed it. So will it run? Yes. Will it crash? No. Can you use it? Great. But as soon as you get tempted to go do something else, now it's like, you probably need a little more oomph in that system.
Yeah. Just again, low settings, recommended settings, max settings, just like a video
Absolutely.
game, right? So
Absolutely.
build it to the target. So,
Nobody wants to run in 720p these days, even though some games will technically do it. Like
Yeah.
it still is not optimal, but hey, some people will do it fine.
Exactly. So looping back to Jonathan's first question, I'll go into a little bit more detail about, ARC and L2ARC and how these things work. So previously on older versions of ZFS, the overhead per record, and a record being the chunk that your ZFS objects are stored in, they're split up into it, used to be a lot worse. It used to be like, I think, a couple hundred bytes per record. It is now down as low as 96 bytes per record. And the reason it's there is because it's basically indexing where on your L2ARC device that data is actually living. So it just has to keep that very small pointer up in ARC. So for the key for this is that record size, which is a changeable option on your data sets or your ZVols or things, that record size matters a bit, not quite as much as you would think, depending on the overall size of what you're storing. So for example, like a ZVol device, if you're using it for a virtual disk, or you've got a data set that's really, really small record size because you're using it for database files, if you're doing a lot of overwrite in places, this is kind of the record size you lean to, because you don't want that read, modify, write. You don't want to read 1 megabyte of file, change 4 kilobytes, and have to write a megabyte back to disk. So for those small ones at 16K, it's about 6 gigabytes per terabyte of L2ARC you have to index. When you get up to the 1 meg archive size, you're well under the 1 gigabyte of RAM per terabyte of storage. So for that larger record size, that's when you're doing, archives, you're backing things up. It's your collection of Linux ISOs that you're so meticulously cataloging. Mm-hmm. But those ones, in the same token, those large records often don't need the L2ARC, because you can usually transact those really fast from even spinning disks. Spinning disks are pretty good at those large sequential IOs. It's when you're trying to pack the little tiny things, like your virtual disks, your DB records. And that's why I think the general rule of thumb shows up about people saying don't have more than 4 or 5 times as much L2ARC as you do primary memory. We're working on a lot of changes upstream, I think, to L2ARC to improve how fast it fills and how big of drives you can use, and try to make sure you're not just unnecessarily wearing out an SSD that you put there for cache without getting real benefit from it. And the way L2ARC fills is, some people say, it's when something's pushed out of main memory, it automatically lands there. It doesn't actually, because again, we talked about this, RAM is way, way faster than solid state drives. So when you've got a process that's demanding RAM, it wants to have it back right away. You don't want to wait for it to have to write to an SSD. So L2ARC fills from the tail end of your ARC, the potential evictions. There's a process that scans through it from both the most frequently and the most recently used ends of the tails. And it says, hey, these are our best candidates. Let's copy them to L2ARC behind the scenes. And that way, if we do have to free up some memory by chopping off the end of that MFU or the MRU tail, it could just drop them without worrying about where that state is gone. If it happens to have landed in ARC already, or L2ARC already, it says, hey, great, it was there. If it doesn't, then you end up with a cache miss. And that's why the L2ARC hit rates can be significantly lower than ARC. Like a typical ARC hit rate is, you want it to be well over 90%. L2ARC usually, I'm pretty happy if I see a 25% hit rate from a lot of speculative, heavy, random workloads on my L2ARC.
So I guess, Chris, would you recommend, if somebody is making a choice, they're building a new TrueNAS and they have dollars to spend, would you recommend they put some of those dollars towards more RAM or more L2ARC? Or I guess it usually depends, right? There's always nuance.
The best solution is always max out your RAM first. Like whatever is reasonable and possible. If you've got 4 RAM slots, I would say, if you can, start with, if your system accepts a max of 128 gigs, start with 32 gig DIMMs if you can afford them. If you start with a single 32 gig DIMM, you leave yourself room to expand all the way to that 128. Will you get some potential improvement from, a solid state L2ARC device? Possibly, but you're likely to get the better results first and foremost from max out your primary RAM, because, well, that's the primary cache. It works much, much better. It's got better logic around handling the frequently and recently used pieces. And then once that's done, you can certainly add a L2ARC device after the fact. It's one of the types of VDEVs that you can add and remove freely. And in fact, it actually is the one device that, if lost, doesn't harm your pool at all. It's going to harm your performance, but it doesn't harm the data integrity because everything on your L2ARC is just a copy of something that exists in a stable state on disk.
That's something so you can easily test with that as well. Attach, check your performance. If it's not doing enough for you, get rid of it. But again, my personal recommendation again is max the RAM out. That's where you're going to see the most bang for your buck usually. And again, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, having extra RAM never hurts.
Absolutely. Well, that was a good question. So thank you very much for that one. Yeah. Okay. So we've got a second question here. Do we want to go into this one now? It's we're opening a can of bees here. So thank you for this one, Adam. He says, "Hey, Kris and Chris, thanks for starting the TrueNAS Tech Talk." Well, you're welcome. Both of you are excellent presenters, and the episodes are super enjoyable. Well,
now I'm all embarrassed and stuff. I'm gonna start blushing. Thank you.
He's buttering you up, Chris. So here we go.
Here it comes.
My question is about ARM64 support. I know a lot of ARM boards have specialized bootloaders and kernels that are required, but more and more hardware is being supported by standard Debian, which of course is the distro that we're underpinning TrueNAS Community Edition with, and a UEFI-compatible bootloader. In the past, the official word on TrueNAS forums was that ARM is not supported, but perhaps it would be nice to discuss and explain the reasoning anymore. So are there any plans in medium or long term to provide support for building some unofficial ARM64 TrueNAS images with a custom kernel, maybe officially supported builds on specific systems like Apple Silicon, Raspberry Pi, the Ampere chips, or the Rock chips SBCs? So what do you think,
This is a
Chris?
good topic. I think this is one of our longest threads we've had on the forum in the past. So we probably should have picked up on that and said, we should talk about this. But thank you, Adam, for prompting it, because it's a really good topic. It's a tough thing, right? It is true. ARM is better supported these days on Debian. We could probably get a build going without a whole ton of effort. There's going to be some certain little technical things that have to be worked through to get good compatibility and NDNS being proper in the right place and all that good stuff. But it's hard to find the business justification to go do that. So this is the challenge I have, right? These projects take resource, they take time. So unless somebody's going to take it on as kind of a personal hobby project just for the fun of it, it's hard for me to say, let's go build TrueNAS for ARM, official or not official, and put that work in when I could be putting effort towards features or functionality that people want to use on the x86 side. And we just don't have as much demand for it on the business side. Again, okay, so say you do get the build going, which somebody could do, by the way. And I'm totally open if we have any aspiring hackers out there who want to look at our build repo and, hey, I think I can fiddle with this to get ARM going. I'd be interested. Let's talk. Let's see if that's something we can work on together. It's almost one of those things where I'm almost to the point of saying, maybe I should go do that myself and take a few weekends. But, I got things I got to do on the weekend too. So it's hard finding the time to sit down and do the hobby project like that. But at the end of the day, just building the image and booting it, you guys got to remember, that's not the whole story. You do that, and then you get it deployed and go, oh, the performance sucks. Do you know how long we've spent optimizing things for x86 hardware and architecture, and ZFS is optimized, all these good things? Could you do it on ARM? Yes, but now it's like you're doing all this catch-up work, and what's the end result? You get to the M and you have an ARM build, and it's super cool from the geek factor, but it does the exact same thing you had on x86 a year and a half before, 2 years before. And it's not like x86 sucks that bad these days, too, for low power systems. I mean, you can run TrueNAS on an N100. I forget how many watts that is. 10 watts, 12 watts?
I think you can configure TDP down into like the low single digits. I think it's 6 watt stock, and you can see TDP them down to like 4.
I should have pulled that up in the background so I get the quote right. But I looked at it and was kind of blown away. I have one. I ran TrueNAS on it. It even does my transcoding on it.
Yep, the low power quick sync is a fantastic thing.
It's amazing.
Even from a raw compute perspective, I think I saw a metric that said those N100s are about the horsepower of the old Sandy Bridge E3 Xeons. I mean,
absolutely,
core for core, we're talking about something that's less wattage than an LED light bulb for something that used to be, a 60 to 100 watt or 100 watt processor.
Absolutely. And so I'll let you in on a little bit of how we do, how the sausage is made here on the other side of the fence, right? So we would look at a request like that and say, okay, we put it on a plot and we say, this is a high effort. It's going to take a lot of time, resource, engineering time, testing time, but it's low impact in the sense of it doesn't deliver anything different that we don't already have today, right? Now, don't get me wrong, the geek factor, the coolness factor, the nerd part of me that wants to go say I have TrueNAS on ARM is extremely high. Like, again, that's why I'm almost personally tempted to do it if I had a ton of extra time.
It's the equivalent of, can this run Doom, right? Can this run TrueNAS?
And there's lots of people who do those kind of things and enjoy it and get personal enjoyment out of it. So again, if you're somebody who wants to go take that on and is interested, shoot me a message, send an email, and I'd be happy to talk to you. It's tough for us to throw the resource at it because there's just not a lot of return these days. And I understand it's a chicken and egg problem too, because people are like, yeah, but there needs to be more demand for ARM, which means you need more software, but the software doesn't want to be there because there's no demand.
Yeah.
So I get it. It's a weird situation, but it's just tough for me to go make that call and say, yeah, let's go assign a bunch of engineers to go work on this for a while to make it work well and right. And I know you said unofficially supported, so fine. But the problem with that is then people have expectations. Well, you released an image, doesn't work. I'm submitting bugs now. Do we just ignore those? I mean, that's tough.
Exactly. It's one of those challenging decisions that, we've unfortunately had to make, to say it's something we can't support right now. And, hence the phrase, it's been unsupported for the longest time. I don't know if anybody out there has actually done that process. If you have, I mean, please make yourself known. You could probably kickstart a little sort of skunkwork projects on the side. And there might be a bunch of people who say, hey, I've got this particular piece of ARM hardware. I know there's a lot of ARM-based NASs out there where they say, hey, I love this hardware, but man, the software's absolute cheeks. Let's try and find a way to get TrueNAS on there, get more people using this. And then you start that wonderful circle of, hey, now we've got some good software that runs on ARM, and maybe we start that going forward. I know there's quite a few of the Docker images that, they are built for ARM as well. So there's a lot of the frameworks in place. So
absolutely. And again, beauty of open source. It's not like you're 100% reliant on us here at IX to do an official build. The repo's on GitHub. You guys have noticed that, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to keep secrets when everything's literally pushed into the public, and that's the power of open source and open source enterprise software and storage. It's great. Like, we're huge fans and believers in that. So again, if there's enough interest, usually a community will form and people will say, yeah, I want to go hack on that. And I'd love to see the code. Like I said, I'd be willing to at least talk to folks and give some pointers. I could at least do that at minimum. But yeah, we'll see. There's got to be enough interest to be organically and grow that way.
Absolutely. Hey, I'd run it myself. If we had a TrueNAS on ARM, I would definitely run it myself, and I'd be able to submit feedback if nothing else.
So
feedback is valuable.
Who knows? Maybe now we can have the running joke. Is this the year of TrueNAS on ARM?
Is it indeed? Yeah, it's the year of Linux, certainly. So can it be the year of TrueNAS Linux on ARM?
Yeah,
Find out.
See.
Well, hey, that was a fun episode. I really enjoyed answering the viewer questions. I don't know about you, Chris, but I would I would definitely welcome much more of those in the future. Please continue sending those in. Again, it's t3@truenas.com. By all means, keep those questions coming. If you got any comments or feedback for us that, is about TrueNAS or is about the videos, hey, drop it in that comment section below. You can do the usual YouTube things as well. Like the video, subscribe, ring the notification bell. Make sure you smash those upvote buttons everywhere we post this, and then subscribe so you don't miss our episode. And we'll see you next time.